figure out how to communicate with each other, live with each other, work with each other, we are doomed. And we can point fingers all we want, but we can't just eject half the population into outer space.
So I want to
ask this real quick, because this is a viewer's question, and it speaks to where we are in this conversation right now. And it's about being concise. It's about intent on what you say. And this person is asking, do you agree that there's a fundamental problem with the way we understand race because of the language surrounding it? So here's a list of words that people think are polarizing. And this was brought in from the last debate. I went through the comments and questions, and people had questions about these terms. And then people have given me these in the last few days. But so whiteness and blackness, white privilege, black privilege, woke, anti-woke, white savior, Uncle Tom, black victim, acting white, wanting to be white. There's way more. We don't have time for that. So their question is, are these words basically the fundamental reason why we're so divisive, because they're so polarizing and they almost cause for a fight because they're so subjective and people have their own definitions of it? And do these help at all? Or are they harmful to us?
Well, the well's already been poisoned with so many of those terms, right? And I mean, the best one can do is recognize that and do his or her best to, find some alternative terms, right? And stop saying whiteness and blackness, but still talk about whiteness and blackness. You know what I mean? And this is just the rhetorical considerations you have to take, right? I mean, that's just the way humans work. So if you know this word is going to trigger this person in a certain way, probably shouldn't use that word. You can still talk about those concepts. Probably shouldn't use that word though.
And what about woke and anti-woke? That's the number one thing, because honestly, I will say that.
Do you want my answer to that one?
Yeah, you can go. And we're over time, so I'll be quick. But I have personally intake the people that follow me and who I'm speaking to online, and I have definitely changed words that I use. I have definitely changed language, because I have seen someone, and I won't say who it is, but someone retweeted me and saying basically, yeah, what she's saying is what we should do or whatever. And I'm thinking, I literally fundamentally disagree with you on everything. And you retweeted me, and I realized my tweet served their narrative. Yeah. So I realized I need to stop using words like woke and anti-woke and these white savior and whatever else. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Shireen. I just want to say that.
I fundamentally have a completely different take on that woke thing. Woke is a black word. Anyone using the anti-woke is saying anti-black. So if you just choose to use it.
So I'm sorry.
I think woke started. I agree with what you're saying.
But that's the thing, when a word gets hijacked and misused like that, and we don't call it out when it happens, then we're in a whole different conversation. So every time I see anti-woke, what that is, I see a group of white people trying to say something bad about black people. That's my interpretation. So I want people to understand, you take a vernacular, AAVE of black people, you twist it to come up with another narrative that's supposed to be anti-AAVE. Come on, y'all.
That's not what's happening.
Well, but I get her point.
Yeah, could I just point out, Shireen, I agree fundamentally with your point about the racism of the hijacking of the term. Unfortunately, though, there's a lot of people, including a lot of people of color, who just aren't thinking about the history of the terms that they're using.
I know.
Right.
And so you get this kind of reaction from people who are like, come on, not everyone who's using the terminology intends and that, and it's true, they don't intend it. And I don't think that exonerates them.
It needs to be said though.
Okay, yeah.
White people are woke too, and they get called woke.
Say what?
No, everybody, listen, white women might be the wokest people on the planet.
No, they're not.
All right?
But she's not using it in the same way.
Depending on your definition.
Right.
She's not at all using it in that way.
I know she's not at all using it. I'm saying other people are.
Yeah, all I'll say,
we have to take that into consideration. It's not saying anti-woke isn't synonymous with saying anti-black. It's not. Now,
Well,
I know
it is,
woke comes from African American vernacular English. I know where it comes from. I know what it's supposed to mean.
But that's the whole thing about hijacking our language and then pretending like we're not having a conversation about what that really is about.
Right.
And we can have, like, we can go into debates about it, but that's the way I see it. So when we talk about communication, right? You keep saying it, right? We have these words, like we're saying all of a sudden it's divisive. Just like cancel culture. Cancel culture is what it's about. It's about people being held accountable who don't want to be held accountable.
That's part of it. And then there's a lot of people who are being canceled for bullshit.
Okay, right. But
it is certainly the case.
It's about holding people accountable, and those people do not want to be held accountable.
I said, there's some people like that, yes.
So
there are a lot of people who are fine with accountability, who are getting docked.
Wait. Okay, we're moving to cancel culture, but wait. Shireen, that was really insightful. I never thought about thinking of anti-woke as anti-black. That was not in my head. I had a different view. I saw it as, and I'm always thinking these political ways, as, okay, you had a group of people who didn't like all this social justice. Oh my God, all these people, well, what is this? This doesn't benefit me at all. So they needed to find a way to push back against that. And they tried to make the woke term negative.
Matter, but we'll call it something else.
It was a way to push back against those progressive ideas that most people think, especially young people, think are positive. So you got people who are older who are like, look, or white or heterosexual or male, it all depends, who just don't like that social justice stuff. And so you got to make woke a bad thing.
So this is actually perfect because Rod and Shireen have both introduced their own definitions for these terms that are being bandied about, right? And they can be right a certain percentage of the time and be wrong a certain percentage of the time. And it's what's great about this is that it's highlighting exactly why these terms are useless and why these terms create more problems than they solve. Because if Shireen, for example, you're right, and you absolutely have every right to hold the definition that anti-woke equals anti-black. You can have that in your head, right? And you can respond to anybody who calls themselves anti-woke with that in your head and apply your definition onto them and respond accordingly. Unfortunately, that's going to lead to many, many, many misfires. And you're going to be making enemies of people who would otherwise be 95% on your side or 80% on your side with most things.
Ever.
No, it is true because.
No, actually not.
Hold on. It is true because if they have a completely different conception of what anti-woke means than you do, and they're using theirs and they're operating based on theirs, not yours, then you're wrong about them. And it's the same thing with Rod. What Rod is saying is that anti-woke people are by definition, hold on. So what Rod is saying is that anti-woke people are by definition people who don't like social justice movements, social justice endeavors. And if you approach people who call themselves anti-woke with that in mind, you'll be right sometimes, you'll be wrong sometimes. And what's going to happen is you're going to make enemies and you're going to cause unnecessary strife.
Wait a minute. What's the utility of what you're saying?
No.
Because
the utility is
response.
Hold on. So my point is that everyone is walking around with their own version of what these things mean and projecting that onto other people who have different versions of what those things mean. And all we're doing is misunderstanding each other. And all we're doing is quibbling over the label when we may actually agree on most of the ideas. With any given encounter, you may actually agree with them on most of the ideas. Maybe their particular objections are reasonable. You don't know. And I'm talking about people who are anti-woke and think this about woke people as well. I'm talking about in any direction. Okay. This is the problem with these terms.
Wait, so what's the solution? Don't use any terms?
The solution
is to listen to other people.
Hold on a second.
The solution is, terms, categories will always arise. It's how people manipulate those categories. You can't say, well, let's not use any categories anymore. That makes sense.
That's not what he said.
But what you can do, wait. But what you can do, and I'm about to wrap up, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to make this point very clear. What you can do is two things. Either, which is the one that I prefer, you can forego these labels because they cause way too much fucking problems and focus on the specific ideas and behaviors.
I'm gonna
that
get
you're addressing.
demonetized, Angel. I'm just kidding.
Okay. So you can focus specifically on the ideas and behaviors in question, right? Get very specific about those things in that moment and forget about putting them under an umbrella. Or you can be very clear about what you mean by that term when you use it before you engage, because then at least the other person has a chance to understand what you're saying to them, instead of just assuming anti-woke means anti-black. And if you say you're anti-woke, that means you're anti-black. I'm just going to assume that that's what you think, and I'm going to approach you that way.
What does that have to do with
you just summarized chapter 2 of my next books, man. So you gotta give me a blurb or something.
I hope in your book you first start by talking about how the people take these categories and manipulate them.
Yes, they absolutely do.
So it's nice.
That.
Exactly.
But no one has a monopoly.
He's not talking about the fact.
About this one.
Exactly.
No one has a monopoly on doing that.
Wait, let's shoot
any word about social justice will be manipulated. You got to deal with that.
And then you address that manipulation in conversation.
All labels are manipulated. All of them.
I mean, that's fine.
Are you laughing at conversation?
No, I'm laughing at this sort of both sides thing, where instead of saying, look, people manipulated the problem.
Here we go.
They made the problem. And instead of admitting that they made the problem, you're saying, well, both of us have different categories. You don't understand. No, just say, look, dudes took social justice and didn't like it and manipulated it.
I love your impression.
All right,
now David Blight.
Really quickly,
I'm done. I'm sorry.
Technically, Rod and I's definition is actually pretty close. Like they're almost identical, right? Okay. Just so that we're clear.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I can go right now on Clubhouse and see any anti-woke room. It's a whole bunch of white people in there screaming about what blackness is.
Any room?
That happens.
Candidly. I go right in there really easily and say, y'all full of shit. A bunch of rooms, sure. This is what you really mean. Now here's the thing.
See other rooms too.
Here's the thing. When someone uses the word to manipulate so that they can get away with targeting people who are trying to focus on social justice, who predominantly happen to be Black, and you're telling me I gotta walk up to them with my eggshells about how they got there.
No.
We're not on the same page, y'all. We're not.
There's no eggshells going on.
There's no eggshells.
No, seriously. I'm walking up to you the way I just said I'm walking up to you. I'm gonna let you know what I know about your interpretation, because what you really mean is
now
you're mind reading. You're reading people's minds now.
This is what I mean. Is you're going to walk in assuming you know what's in their head.
Out of your mouth after I say that is going to tell me the rest, because most people tell on themselves.
If you want, sure. But what I'm saying is,
and that's how I approach every person.
Sure, it's not eggshells. It's not eggshells. It's trying to understand where the other person is coming from.
No. I don't walk on eggshells. I'm saying I'm never walking on eggshells.
We're not saying you.
I'm not telling you. I'm telling
them they're anti-Black. Period.
Okay. But you're going to be wrong more often than you're not.
No, I have not been wrong yet.
Yeah. I have
not been wrong yet.
Okay.
That rhetorical tactic you use may not get you as far as you think it's going to.
Oh, I'm good.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
I mean, assuming you know what's in people's heads before you ask them is always going to be.
Those categories are fine, man. It's actually pretty clear that people who are woke tend to have certain views, and people who are anti-woke tend to be opposed to those certain views. So it's not a completely useless category. I'm just upset. I would say upset, but I'm always concerned at this both sides thing. Clearly, one group meant to cause problems for another. We don't like woke. We don't like woke, so we're going to make it a bad thing. Of course, it started as a positive thing. And instead of starting with that and then saying, okay, fine, they did this problem and we deal with it. No, you want to just say, well, we're all equal here. Let's just go in and talk about it equal. That's
also not what he says.
Yeah, not what's going on here.
He didn't say it. I wanted him to say that people
so you want me to make a worse argument so that you can shit on it. No,
I want you to make an accurate argument, not a worse one.
Because no one has a monopoly on redefining terms and poisoning terms for their own.
There you go again with that. Look.
The fact that no one has a monopoly doesn't mean that there aren't people who are closer to a monopoly.
Okay, I just look. This is why I'm saying these things are a waste of time, because this is what we end up arguing about instead of arguing about the actual idea at hand, which is the thing that matters. I don't give a fuck what team you think I'm on. I don't care.
Demonetized.
Okay?
I know. That was ding number 10.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're fine, Angel.
I'm sorry.
I can edit that out.
But yeah, I don't care what team you think I'm on. I'm just trying my best to make sense. And you can call me a fence sitter and a centrist and a both sides or whatever. I don't care, because all I'm trying to do is make sense here. And I think those things, those labels are being thrown at me with a purpose. The purpose is to make me more unlikely to be heard, to make me less understandable, because you go, oh, look at this guy pretending that everything is equal and that both sides are equally guilty. And I didn't say that. But what I did say,
but you did not say it either.
Well, there's a lot that I didn't say. I'm
just letting you know, because that is important.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me
conversation.
Hold on. Let me real quick. Let me make sure I renounce Hitler. Let me.
I gotta go in a second.
I'm not a white supremacist. Let me make sure I say all the things that I didn't say, because then Rod might take me to task for not having said it. That's ridiculous.
In this context, it would have been nice if you would have pointed out the fact that woke was manipulated by right-wing people to push back against social justice.
Yes, and
it seems important to the conversation.
Sure, but all other terms have also been manipulated, and that's part of the issue.
You know.
Oh man, now you're gonna end on that. I didn't even get the chance to.
People on the left use that term too. Y'all know that, right?
Come on,
I'll just talk about. Everyone says that the left is redefining all these terms that they're not actually redefining. That are just what happens is there's more cases like, oh look, this professor said this, and it's another whole thing with the disparity of the amount of incidents to the amount of coverage. And I would love to talk about that sometime, Angel. Maybe we can start a podcast about it.
Sure, man.
That would be awesome. I listen to that. Okay, so we're 4 minutes from the cap. I know. I see, Eric. You're like up, just lean back.
Yeah, I love this.
He's like, I'm ready. Like I stay ready. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up with this because I have so many more questions, but we don't have time for it because I know you guys have to go. But can a couple of people answer Carissa's question? She asked this in regards to the whole discussion. What do you personally hope for our divided discourse on race? What do you hope that happens? Just a couple of people.
I hope more people talk about the history of racism in the United States and the extent of the history and how much of it has been deliberately excluded from public school education throughout our history and continues to be. I hope that people, because I think racism, the number one thing that will change someone who is, I don't like to, someone who has certain racist beliefs or assumptions, the way that those people do change and the way that like white people who are maybe not racist, but ignorant about racism, how they become more educated, and non-white people too, is through close interracial relationships, friendships, and family member relationships. I think that's the number one way that people come to change their views about racism. And then the second is just being exposed to the sheer extent of the history of racism in the United States, which is in many cases, in I think virtually all cases, underemphasized in a lot of K through 12 U.S. history education, and that all these people promoting white fragility as a solution, that just more teachers need to investigate their own whiteness. It's everyone should investigate themselves, but the solution is not to have individual teachers change their practices. The solution is to look at a systemic and institutional and policy level. What are we teaching, and what are we deliberately not teaching? And so this great book by David Blight, Race and Reunion, The Civil War in American Memory, talks just about how much the lost cause ideology of the Confederates after the Civil War seeped into American American history education and American just the consciousness. The idea that Reconstruction was the result of the brief Reconstruction where we had the first civil rights legislation passed in this country that was then utterly just completely trampled over through Jim Crow and other roundabout things. Like, there's just so much that we don't teach. And I know we can't teach everything, but we could teach a lot more.
Okay.
I agree 100% with what Sam just said. He stole my script.
Nice.
No, I agree with both of them. But my one added piece about this is that we need to be honest. This country is not honest. I said that earlier. And the American exceptionalism is the lie that allow people to not to address race with themselves, as well as what we need to do in this country moving forward, for sure.
He came back for the
Will
end.
is back.
Will, to play us out.
Back. The end. Hey, Will, do you actually want to answer this question since you're here? We're going to end, but this will be good for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry, guys. This is a mess. Appreciate it.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Thanks for coming back. So
Thanks for teaching the youth of America.
yeah, like doing your duty. So what do you personally hope happens with our divided discourse on race? If there's like one or two things, what do you hope, especially as a teacher?
I mean, I think although I miss more of this than I would have liked. I think these kinds of conversations, these kinds of conversations where we can dive into the nuance, I think that's a really important part. I have my leanings, but they're loosely held. I can kind of be convinced of a lot of different things, but I think a big thing is just having more of these nuanced conversations, long form. I mean, I was like, oh, I wonder if they'll still be on, and you are. It's like, of course. I like Mark Lamont Hill's show, but it's like I want, like when he had on Chris Rufo or James Lindsay or someone like that. Like I want it stretched out more. I think we have to be willing to have this. I believe that there's a market for it. As far as education goes, I think that we need to all get on board. I hope, and I'm sorry I missed it. I said what I said and I had to get off, but like there are bad ideas being pushed in classrooms under the guise of like critical race theory or critical theory or aiming for racial justice, and it's not good stuff. And I think that if we can get on board with like that's bad stuff, then for like my peeps in education, I think that's a big one. Is like we can be on board with like don't do that. And I think coming from especially like people who are in support of CRT, so from like Rod, Sam, Shireen, and others, I think that would be a really good place to move kind of towards us, and then like if we're like dividing us, and then we go like, yeah, and we need to recognize that there's important stuff that also needs to be represented, and just being willing to find some common ground and common understanding, I think is really important.
Awesome. So thank you all for tuning in to another successful discussion on American Shade. I think this was awesome and great because it was real, even though there's tense moments. People challenge each other's ideas, but this is what's reality. So I want to thank all of you for coming. Sam, Rod, Shireen, Will, Angel, and Eric. I appreciate you all and your time. And audience, if you are curious to find more out about them, all their information will be linked. So until next time, peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.
Bye.
Nice hanging with y'all.
Nice hanging with you.
For real.
Peace.